You are someone that people go to for expertise on a number of things, one of which is reparations.
Yes.
What do you? What is your position on reparations for African Americans based on slavery?
I think that it's a legitimate claim, that it falls within the highest human morality as well as the highest international law, that when there is an injury done to people, that there is a compelling interest in repairing that injury, and that injury cannot simply be paid by some money. You cannot pay people for what happened to us. What we have to do, though, is define what the nature of the injury is. If it's just slavery or slave trade, then it's commerce gone bad with millions of people called collateral damage. But it is not slave trade. It's not a commercial issue. It's an ethical issue. Therefore, we call it Holocaust of enslavement. And by Holocaust, I mean a morally monstrous act of genocide that is not only against the people themselves, but also against humanity. And it expresses itself in three basic ways. The morally monstrous destruction of human life. Estimates from 10 to 100 million people killed, forcibly transferred, boiled alive, burned alive, skinned alive, quartered and left for brain dead in the Western Hemisphere. Second, the morally monstrous destruction of human culture. Not just small houses destroyed, but cities, towns, villages, great works of art, great literatures, and the people who made those. And third, the morally monstrous destruction of human possibility, lifting us out of our own history, making us a footnote and forgotten casualty in European history, and poisoning the possibilities of our relationship with other people when they attempted to dehumanize us and to introduce us as marginal to humanity rather than at the center, which we actually are, as fathers and mothers of human civilization. Just think about it, Tony. If we had been left to develop in our own term and contribute to the forward flow of human history with the rest of the nations of the world, what new sciences could have been developed? What new ways could we have understood the universe and the oceans? What new ways would we have understood ourselves as human beings, and what kind of quality relations we could have had in pushing humanity forward? But Europe, who had the capacity to unite the world, decided instead to enslave it. And therefore, we need reparation. Let me just say, reparation cannot be money. It has to be five fundamental things.
Cannot be money.
No, it cannot just be money, just be money. There is an aspect of money, but let me talk about that. We might decide no money. There are five fundamental aspects to reparation, to repairing such an injury. The first is public admission. Admission that is Holocaust, not slave trade, not commerce gone bad with collateral damage, but Holocaust, a morally monstrous act of genocide, both physical and cultural. Second, it has to be, and by the way, the Durban Conference Against Racism reaffirmed that it is a crime against humanity. The second thing is apology. That's why we reject the congressional person who wanted to introduce a one-sentence resolution in Congress apologizing for slavery. I don't want them to apologize for slavery. I want them to apologize for Holocaust. The second thing is, after we do the public admission that is Holocaust, as a result of a national debate, and it must be a national debate that precedes the admission, because America is in acute denial about what it did to us and to Native Americans and to other people of color. Then the apology. Third, public recognition. That is to say, monuments, media education, and its infusion in the educational system, teaching the horror and meaning of this Holocaust, not only to us in this country, but also to the world. And by the way, the first monument for Holocaust should have been to the Native Americans who suffered one equal to our own. 100 million Native Americans destroyed. And so we must come to terms with that, because until we come to terms with what has been done to the Native American, America will never be able to call itself a just and good society. The fourth aspect is compensation. That could be money, land, free health care, or what I like, education from the kindergarten through college, free education. That would change the balance of power in this country. So I advocate that, but I think we need a national dialogue. And finally, preventive measures. After we have the admission, the apology, the public admission, the public apology, the public recognition, and the compensation, we must have preventive measures. And there is no preventive measure other than creating a just and good multicultural society.
How do you distinguish between Holocaust and slavery? What is the distinction you're using?
Well, slavery, enslavement in the form we suffered it is in fact a Holocaust. But enslavement simply means to turn people into objects of labor and use, to deny them their rights, their very humanity. Do you realize that we're the only people in the world where you can say slave and no one would ask you what kind? You have a book, The Slave Community, Slave Revolts, the world slave made. No one says this Jew, Gentile, Greek, Roman. Everybody assumes it's African. That's what Europe did to us. They weren't satisfied with taking our bodies and using them as objects and instruments of labor. They needed to actually take our very humanity, our capacity for self-definition, our capacity to stand among the rest of the nations of the world in dignity and as bearers of dignity and of divinity. It's an odd thing about that, because we are the people who introduced, not the Jew, not the Gentile, we are the people who introduced the very concept of human dignity. As early as 2140 BCE, in the book of Keti, in the Hosea of ancient Egypt, it says we're in the image of God, and therefore there are certain things that we should not do to ourselves nor allow others do to ourselves. It's reaffirmed in the Middle Kingdom text, the narrative of Jedi, where Jedi tells the Pharaoh that he can neither kill nor experiment even on a nameless prisoner, because no matter what your social status is, that inherently you are a bearer of dignity and divinity. And so when we talk about enslavement, we mean taking all that away and seeing humans as simple objects. But Holocaust is even more than that, because it is wrecking the life. It is a morally monstrous destruction of human life, human culture, and human possibility. It is, in fact, a crime against humanity.
Whites today were not around in the ancient times, prehistoric times. No white is alive today who owned slaves, and many of them feel offended that they are personally called upon to make this apology. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, you always have to use examples of white people and what they're getting, then people understand it. There are Germans alive today that weren't doing the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews, and yet they're paying. Why are they paying? You see, that's because people inherit problems from the state before them. And so the claim we're making is a claim against the government, which represents the people. And let me tell you this. People understand this in international law. This happens with more people than us. We're not the first one. People who are not here doing the genocide and Holocaust against the Native American still have to pay Native Americans certain reparation because of that. So that's not a problem, really. The problem is that black people are asking for it. Let me also tell you this. When we talk about that, there are three levels of responsibility here: perpetrator, collaborator, and beneficiary. So even if you didn't perpetuate it, if you collaborated, if any of your people collaborated, you bear some responsibility. And finally, they're beneficiary. White people benefited from the enslaved labor that we are provided for this country. Do you really believe this country could have done what it did without black mind and body? And it's not just body. They would like to have you think that. But you know, at the beginning, black people dominated the trades and had the skills. The fine iron wire you see in New Orleans, that's black people. When you see other things that you can't even recognize, like the building of the White House and all that, that Randall Robinson talks about in his book, you realize that Africans did that. And so it's not simply that we gave brawn, we also gave brain. And we made America into a multicultural society George Washington or Thomas Jefferson would not recognize and probably couldn't accept.
What about the argument that Irish were discriminated against? Jews certainly were discriminated against. Many of the European groups who came here were discriminated against, and they wonder why they're called upon to pay reparations to blacks who were discriminated against.
So what we have to deal here with is categorical preciseness. We're not talking about discrimination. We're talking about Holocaust. That's a whole different kind of thing. If the Jews made a case against Nazi Germans, say they just discriminated against us, they wouldn't have any case at all, really. But that is why Europe tries to define the issue. You know, I argue that one of the greatest powers in the world is the power to define reality and make others accept it, even when it's to their disadvantage. And so we're not talking about discrimination. We're talking about Holocaust. That requires reparation. Discrimination requires correction. And sometimes even that legally requires reparation. But there is no doubt in anybody's mind that Holocaust requires reparation.